I want to show you how you can actually test those to make sure that whenever one of those exceptions is thrown, then the appropriate message and the appropriate response is sent back to the user. So if we go back to the resource, right, we can test it here by just throwing the exception. Now, there's one thing that I want to do is to stop the handler from blocking our calls because we're not authenticated right now. So that means that I don't want the entry point to fire and then block those requests and say, hey, we're not authenticated, because I don't care at this point. I just want to make a successful call to this and then throw the exception so that I can see the exception in action. So I'm going to go to the constant package and to the constant class. And in here, what I want to do is, instead of allowing only those to the public URL, I'm going to allow everything so that the entry point doesn't stop us and say, hey, we're not authenticated. So I'm going to comment this out and copy the same line. I'm going to paste it down there, and then I'm going to remove everything. I'm just going to leave the two asterisks. So that means that any request is actually now public. So you definitely don't want to do that. I just want, to show you how we can test those exceptions, and I don't want the security to block me, say, hey, only those are allowed, and this user / home is not allowed. So I don't want the handler to stop me whenever I try to access the application. So I temporarily, make the public URLs everything. So at this point, it's like the application doesn't have any security, because every request can come in and it will just say, oh, that's part of the public URL. So I'm just telling you this is just for testing. So now if we go back to the resource, all we have to do now is to just throw any of those exceptions. And once we do that and try to access the application through here, it will actually throw one of those exceptions, whichever one we will choose. So let's go back here. Well, actually, let's select one of them. So let's say I want to throw let's see, email exists, right? So we created this one. This is a custom exception that we create. So I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this, and then back in the resource, I'm just gonna comment this line out on line 14, and then I'm just gonna do throw a new email not found exception, and then here I can pass a message, right? So whenever I'm using the application and then I want to throw this exception, right, I'm just gonna create a new class or object of that class, and then pass in the message that I want to pass. So let's say this email address is already taken, for instance, right? So I'm just telling them, hey, this email address you're trying to use to create your account is already taken, and then I can add this to the method signature like this. So here we're throwing this exception. So now if I try to access this /user/home, it's just gonna throw this exception. As you can see here, I don't have any code to send any request, any response to the user or anything like that. All I'm doing is just throwing this exception right here. So what's gonna happen is the system is gonna look in this class and then find the handler for that exception and then throw this message. So that's what's supposed to be happen. So let's go ahead and start the application and then try that. So the application is up. As you can see, if we scroll to the right a little bit, you can see that we started on port 8081. So let's bring up the browser and then try to access user/home. So it's the browser. So let's go to localhost, and that's going to be 8080. And if you remember, we have to go to user/home. Okay, so just to make sure you know what's going on. So we're going to go to this URL. So the user and then /home. So that should send us this response for this handler that we created here. So this response is what's supposed to be returned with the message. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So let's click enter. As you can see, there it is. This email address is already taken. So you can see how this is a little bit modular because we're handling everything in a single class. And we can try something else. Let's say user not found, right? So I can copy this and then go back here, and I'm just gonna say throw this instead, and then I can just do the user was not found, right? And then I need to remove this, and I need to bring this in. All right, so right now we're throwing the user not found exception. So we should see the same thing, but this time with this message, and that's for the user not found exception. So let's restart the application and try this again. All right, so the application is up. If you can see here. All right, port 8081, so we're up. Let's go back to the browser. So now if I refresh, it should say something else here, as in the actual user was not found. So let's refresh, and the user was not found, which is the message that I passed in here. The user was not found. Okay, so you can see how this is all coming together now. And anywhere in the application where we throw this exception, it doesn't have to be like inside a controller or anything like that. So if I'm in any other classes in the application, and then whatever logic that I'm coding, anytime that I throw any of those exception in this class, it will just return the same message that we just got here. It'll just return this. So that way our application is very, very consistent. So there's another thing I want to show you. You see, like if we go to, let's say for instance, I go to slash, and let's just put some random string here. So this route, right, doesn't exist. This user slash home slash js jjs js. So I just type this random character here like this. It doesn't mean anything, meaning we don't have a mapping for this. Right now, if I go to this URL, you can see we have this default white label error, and it's saying, hey, this is a 404 because we didn't find anything for this path right here. We can't find anything, and then by default Spring returns this 404 message, which is essentially, if you go to right click here and go to inspect and then go to the element, it's actually an HTML response that we get back. So it would be nice in the application, right, just for the sake of consistency, to actually send our response, it's the response that we have created that's gonna look something like this. Okay, so if they go to any URL that's not mapped to anything, as you can see here, instead of throwing this white label error page, we wanted to throw something like this, right? It only makes sense, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how you can do this in the next lecture.